Classic WoW. You think you do, but you won't. Part 2. This is MultimediaJay radio style for Thursday, August 22nd, 2019. Let's start the show.
MultimediaJay radio style.
I realize that some of my recent decisions regarding MMOs bring my credibility into question with regards to the World of Warcraft WoW Classic thing. And so I wanted to hop on the microphone and clear all of this up. First and foremost, my views on WoW Classic have not changed. And even though I reactivated a subscription just to check out Classic, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to become the BFF of BFA anytime soon. I don't have BFA. I'm playing through Legion content that I missed. And it's Legion content that is already bought and paid for as of 2016. It's something I already have. So I'm playing through it, because it's like if you buy a book and it sits on the shelf for years and finally you get around to reading it. Plus, around the time that I was playing Legion, I was calling it a Band-Aid expansion because we'd all just come off of the nonsense that existed in Warlords of Draenor. And nowadays, with where BFA is gone, Legion is actually known as a good expansion. So if I'm going to come back to the game and noodle around with some stuff that I missed before Classic comes out, I might as well be checking out some of this Legion content and getting my money's worth with that. Again, I left World of Warcraft in 2016 for non-antagonistic reasons. I was just curious about ESO and how much better it is going to get, or at the time it was going to get, once One Tamriel launched. And it absolutely is better nowadays. That's what I meant to say earlier. ESO is absolutely my game. As a matter of fact, the experience in ESO nowadays is eating into my reasons for wanting to play Classic. I've thought about that quite a bit in the past couple of days, in particular. I mean, I resubbed to Classic just to check it out, see, how the experience is different this time around versus when I first started playing the game in 2006. I'm thinking of actually doing a total deja vu nostalgia tour, doing some of the same things wrong again, like leveling a paladin as holy, and other stuff that I did, but with all this much more MMO experience since then, and just see how much different things are. Like, I'm not going to level up and take one of every stat. So by the time I'm hitting 40 or so, hanging around Theramore, my character has like 200 strength, 200 agility, 200 stamina, 200 intelligence. As I'm like, I want to be a jack of trades in this game, even though I'm leveling a holy paladin and I get holy shock at level 40. So I finally get a ranged attack. My guy's going to be able to do a little of everything. Yeah, I was a moron back then. But yes, I was tossing around the idea, I should say, of playing a Shakadin. If you don't know what a Shakadin is, you gotta meet up with some old veterans of the Burning Crusade. Shakadins were an anomaly. It was an attempt to kick against the bricks of Blizzard pretty much pinholing paladins into being little sissy heal bots, at least until tank paladins became something other than a gimmick. It was big in Burning Crusade, mostly in PvP. Basically, with the addition of spell damage plate. Yeah, don't adjust the microphone while you're talking now. Trying to get this pop filter right so I'm not pooing all over the place. But in Burning Crusade, when the itemization was improved a bit and there was more spell damage plate, if you took the offensive version as opposed to the defensive version for healers, you could actually really blast other players with trinkets, cooldowns, Avenging Wrath, Holy Shock, and Judgment of Righteousness. So Shakadins gained some infamy as being the healbot's surprise in PvP. Like, hey, look, that dude that was just spamming Flash of Light just blew me up with Holy Shock and a Judgment. What the heck? Paladins are overpowered. I thought they were the defensive hybrid. So I was like, I know that the classic itemization didn't support this kind of stuff very well, if at all, back in the original game. But what if I were to kind of see how far the Shockadin thing could go in Classic? And then recently I thought, wait a minute, why on earth do I want to go to all the trouble in Classic? I have ESO now. The single best player freedom supporting MMO out there among the major MMOs. Why am I trying to do this in Classic? So I've actually been going around in ESO trying to basically take my Templar guy and turn him into a Shockadin by cranking his spell damage through the roof. Now, this may be a fool's errand, and it may be kind of chasing after something silly that existed as an anomaly in another game, but I figure, hey, why not? So, in terms of playing Classic, I am running out of reasons other than just being curious as to why I would play any of World of Warcraft's stuff. There's been talk about, things like Classic Plus and stuff, like, oh, well, once Classic is a mature product and it's proven that it can be somewhat successful, maybe Blizzard can give, a server for people to transfer to, and they can make some adjustments after the fact to Classic and basically have an expansion packless version of WoW out there. And that's not something I don't think Blizzard's going to really go running towards something like that or really get into that sort of thing, because I don't think Blizzard wants to have all these versions of the game in their server farm out there that they now have to support. It's kind of an IT no-no to have more stuff to support than absolutely necessary, but I suppose if the demand's there for it, we definitely can't leave it off the table. But the most important thing that I need to mention in this discussion is that my views on WoW Classic have absolutely not changed. Now, I did an extremely good discussion on this, and I'm not going to step on its toes. It was called WoW Classic, You Think You Do, But You Won't, and I talked about it earlier in the year, and just about all of my points are still valid. There might be a couple of things that I mentioned, like some details here and there that you can tell the videos from, or the discussion, the podcast, I should say, is from earlier in the year. But I still, just despite resubbing to WoW just to check out Classic, even though ESO is eroding away my interest in the game, I definitely have to mention that all of my points from earlier in the year are 100% still valid. I'll post a link in the end screen to this. It'll be video number 2 on the end screen that pops up at the end of the podcast. Go check it out, give it a listen. I'm also going to post a link in the description to the BlizzCon 2007 WoW class panel, What We've Come From blog entry that I posted earlier in the year as well, which is basically an aggregation of the Le Monsoon channel's videos that someone shot with a camcorder at BlizzCon 07, talking about how Blizzard thought back then and how they approached class discussion and class design and the changes that were coming in, and then, the then to be released Wrath of the Lich King and lessons learned and stuff. The interesting thing about the BlizzCon 07 discussions is that these discussions are issues that were fixed at that point that are going to be unfixed in Classic. So all the annoyances, what might sound annoying with the discussions about the classes in WoW at the time, are all going to be stuff that people are going to have to deal with again very, very shortly. So, yeah, my viewpoints have not changed on Classic WoW. Not in the slightest. I am very much grumpy old Luke Skywalker on this deal. If you saw The Last Jedi, this is not going to go the way you think. J. Allen Brack had that infamous quote, "You think you do, but you don't." I take it a step further. You think you do, but you won't. I think J. Allen Brack is going to be proven right. The wool is going to be pulled off of people's eyes. The rose-tinted nostalgia goggles are going to be yanked off of people's faces when WoW Classic launches. And somebody is going to owe J. Allen Brack a beer when this is all over. Or something like that. Because, oh man, let me tell you what the problem is with Classic WoW. And it's story time, folks, so grab a pillow or whatever and listen up. The problem with Classic WoW is that people remember vanilla World of Warcraft like someone would remember an old girlfriend from high school. Imagine, if you will, there's a young guy. He dates this girl in high school. They're awesome together. She's beautiful. She's awesome. They're great for each other. They're a wonderful couple. He thinks about how they're gonna get married and have kids and buy a house, and they're gonna have such a great life together. They're so good for each other. She's so amazing for him. He's so amazing for her. But unfortunately, she doesn't share his optimism, and she ends up dumping him. And he's heartbroken. And when he, like the love song lyrics go, finally scoops his heart up off the floor and tries to move on with his life, he is still very much a dreamer. He thinks about the what-ifs. What could have been? Could he have done something differently that would have kept them together and she wouldn't have dumped him and all that lovely stuff? And he wonders about this for the entire rest of his young adult life. It always, at least, is in the back of his mind. What if? What could have been? Could there have been a way for it to work out? Until that fateful day when he goes to his 20-year high school reunion. And she has to introduce herself to him again, because if she didn't say something, he wouldn't have recognized her. Because with everybody in their late 30s, very squarely heading towards middle age, some more obvious than others, time has done its thing. To both of them, but especially to her. She never quite lost the baby weight from having her last kid. She has gray hair, bags under her eyes, is very stressed because she has multiple kids from multiple fathers and chases them all for child support, to varying results, and works multiple jobs and stresses herself out, and is lucky if she can ever get anywhere close to a decent amount of sleep every night just to keep a roof over her head and keep raising her kids and providing for them. But time has clearly taken its toll. And to make matters even more awkward, at the time that she's like, "Oh, hey, remember me?" to the guy that she dumped all those years earlier, she's socializing with the woman that used to be the class nerd. The one who had no friends, just studied, had no looks either. People said she took after her father in a very condescending, objectifying, and insulting manner. But what do you know? She had some strange genetics in her family and was what the doctors would call a very late bloomer. She became a knockout in her 20s, right around the time that she was finishing her doctorate's degree. Or something to that effect. Bottom line is, she has a STEM career making lots of money now as a scientist, married with kids, happy, and has done far better than the former class diva. And this guy gets a very, very rude life lesson in perspective and how you remember things through this encounter. On his way home from the reunion, he finally caves and just can't bite his tongue any longer. With both hands on the wheel, he just says, to no one in particular, because he's driving all by himself on a lonely country road somewhere, I don't know. He finally says, "Thank God we didn't stay together. Holy crap, I had no perspective back then. The nerd girl did better than her." And as bizarre as this story may sound, why would something like that happen? Because when we get past a certain point in our lives and, we stop associating with someone or something or whatnot, our memories freeze at the last point we were together with those folks. We don't know what's been going on in the intervening years, or how the stuff that we do know about affects them, or will affect our perception of them if we ever saw them again. And this is, from a conceptual standpoint anyways, exactly the kind of weird, awkward reunion that I think a lot of people fantasizing about classic WoW are going to have when this game launches. I'll be watching a few things, like what goes on the forums, who whines about what, and whether Blizzard can successfully not cave on the whole classic is classic thing. But my views have not changed. We are in for one heck of a ride when all of these people that have been all rose-tinted about WoW Classic finally get to play the game they haven't seen in years all over again and realize not only what it was then, but what it is now. and exactly how much their memories of the game have been warped and twisted by nostalgia. I'll tell you, it's been very funny seeing all of these guides on YouTube, so to speak, these videos that are supposedly guides for how to get back into WoW Classic. You know, they're spoiling the surprise. I mean, it's like, hey, here, if you're too used to modern WoW, here's some things you gotta get used to in order to get into Classic WoW. Let these people find out the hard way, especially if they've been like, modern WoW sucks, the old way was better. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. And I'm sure there'll be server queues too. There's already been that warning that's gone up about, hey, if you folks don't set up on another server, there's going to be 10,000 plus server queues that are hours and hours and hours. That sounds like part of the vintage WoW experience. But my views on server queues are something completely worth its own discussion, or its own recap, I should say, because I've discussed this before. In a nutshell, the only reason any World of Warcraft product, classic, modern, or otherwise, still has server queues is because Blizzard has not used their existing technology to make them obsolete, even though they have the technology to do so. I was talking about this 5 years ago in Warlords of Draenor. The discussions are still out there. Probably more hammed up than most of the stuff that I make nowadays, because I hammed things up a lot more for entertainment value back then and really threw some emotion into what it was that I was talking about. Sometimes to the point of melodrama, but yeah. And also, I was legitimately more frustrated back then because there weren't games like ESO to serve as the antidote to the fishbowl effect of Blizzard being the only MMO that was actually, World of Warcraft, I should say, being the only MMO that was actually successful. Blizzard having the monopoly that it did back then. Of course it was going to make someone more frustrated when the developers got all Blizzy knows best and be like, well, we might not add flying to Warlords of Draenor, and we might take it out of the rest of the game and never have it again. I will not dig up that old skeleton again, but I'm sure there are commentaries out there from people on YouTube that still talk about this exact thing back in those days. But let's leave the past in the past for now. People are going to get a very hefty dose of the past very, very shortly. And a very, very hefty blast back to reality at the exact same time. So be sure to check out my previous discussion on why I don't think WoW Classic is going to be what people think it is. You think you do, but you won't. I am not stepping on its toes in this follow-up discussion, but yeah. Let me make myself perfectly clear. My views on WoW Classic have not changed at all, just because I'm toying around in some Legion content while waiting for Classic to launch. And if the servers I'm set up on have server queues, I'll just play more ESO. Heck with WoW. Monolith is more than strong enough to run both games. So, like I said last time, it's going to be a very different experience playing WoW Classic than it was in WoW Vanilla, even if you do the exact same things like I plan on doing, and taking the exact same progression paths, because stuff has happened since then. It's a different world. And it'll be very interesting to see how much this different world turns into a different world of Warcraft. Maybe there can be another South Park special, I don't know. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.